This week's podcast guest couldn't come at a more appropriate time. We all need to practice self-awareness in both our professional and personal lives. It's vital to allow space for other people's viewpoints, especially as polarization seems to be creating so much more hate and division in our community and society than it should. While our conversation is rooted in how there needs to be shifts in the workplace to create more inclusivity and within our teams and with our client bases, I see the significance of this happening outside of the workplace in order for the change to be real. So please listen in, take note, and hopefully start being more conscious of our language and actions we project. Welcome to The Seed, Cultivating Growth and Empowering Women in Business, brought to you by Dandelion-Inc. I'm your host, Lisa Resnick, and this podcast is all about connecting, developing, and supporting women in business. Join me as we explore tips and insights on leadership, business development, and social media strategies that can help you thrive. We'll also hear from amazing guests who share their stories and experiences, offering inspiration and practical advice for your entrepreneurial journey. So tune in, download, like, and subscribe. And remember, if you love what you hear, share it with others. Together, let's cultivate growth and empower women in business. Hi, everyone. I am so excited about today's guest. She is an executive advisor and inclusive workshop cultural consultant, Stacey Gordon. She anchors action using change management principles while facilitating mindset shifts. She combines concepts of recruiting, career development, diversity, and workplace culture to focus on reworking how companies work, including how they inclusively recruit, hire, engage employees, effectively creating inclusion and belonging for all. Through her company, Rework Work, she has worked with executive leaders and people managers from companies such as American Express, Kia Motors, Hewlett-Packard, GE, Roku, the Obama Foundation, and many others to deliver education, coaching, and consulting that supports organizational change and leadership development in furtherance of creating inclusive workplace cultures. As a globally recognized keynote speaker, leadership consultant, and DEI strategist, Stacey has provided subject matter expertise to Harvard Business Review. And I'm going to mess this up, and Stacey, please correct me later on. SHRM. For some reason, I believe it's pronounced something.
Sure.
That's right. Sure. I knew I heard that. Fast Company, Skillsoft, Forbes, NPR, and BBC Radio. Stacey's book, Unbiased, Addressing Unconscious Bias at Work, debuted #1 on Amazon's hot new releases list, while her unconscious bias course on the LinkedIn Learning, which she just popped over from LinkedIn platform, was the #1 most watched course in 2021 and has been translated into several different languages. Her audience is quickly approaching 2 million unique learners, and Stacey has been recognized as a passionate supporter of DEI by Forbes, the Los Angeles Times, Pepperdine University, and LinkedIn. She earned her MBA from Pepperdine University Business School and her SHRM SCP certification, as well as her SHRM Inclusive Workplace Cultural Credential. So, I mean, holy cow. Holy cow. And I bet you're not even close to being done yet.
I know. Although after all this political crap that's going on right now, I am
Oh
so close to being done. I just want to hang up my hat and be like, I'm out. I'm
Yeah.
done.
I think I've said this. I was like, it's on every time. There's a few songs that play in my mind, but one of them in a negative sense is the Aladdin, It's a Whole New World.
Mm,
And you're like, but no. They're not this world. We don't want this one.
yeah, I'm so done.
Yeah. Well,
But I'm
it
still here
is,
for now.
yes, it's currently July. We have a few more months, which is going to seem forever, that it's going to be in our faces beyond belief. And then it's going to be phase two.
Right, right. So,
And we'll see what happens with phase two. So, with all that being said, I gotta know what made you decide to spearhead and really like be such a change maker in creating, because same page, I'm all about the diversification, the inclusion, the acceptance, everything, definitely the equity for all of us. What's your origin story of getting to where you are now?
it's a lot. It really is. I mean, I jokingly say, in case you haven't noticed, I am Black, and I'm a woman.
Yeah.
And so
Like,
the
check.
yeah, those are two areas where there's just a lot of discrimination that
Yes.
comes to play, just without you even thinking about it. And so I've had to put up with that all my life. And I think back, it was actually, I hadn't even thought about this, but I was on another podcast a few weeks back, and somebody asked, like, um, who inspired you? How did
Yeah.
you get to this point? And I thought, I used to always say, well, nobody. This is just, I've never been one of those people who's like, I look up to this celebrity or to this
Yeah.
person in history. I'm always like, look, I'm me. I'm going to do me. If you don't like me, too bad, but this is who I am.
Which is the right attitude in my mind that all
Yeah,
of us should have.
right. But then I realized, I was like, I do think I get some of that spunk from my grandmother.
Oh,
Uh,
hey.
and because she always used to tell this story where so my grandmother worked like three jobs, right? And one of her jobs was a janitor in the local library. And
Okay.
it was at night. So my parents were working a lot. A lot of times I'd have to go with her to her job. And then my parents would have to come pick me up from the library. So I'd be hanging out there while she was cleaning, right? And so we're on the bus going to her job. And this white woman wanted my grandmother to give up her seat. And I basically told her off and was like, my grandmother works really hard. She is not giving you her seat, and how dare you?
What? She literally wanted her to give up her seat. See, these are the moments that I am I am like, what's wrong? Like, what is happening that people think that they just have this like automatic right and privilege to things?
Well, it's the sense of entitlement. And I don't know. It's like, it's almost to the point where, especially since the pandemic, you would think people would be more collaborative, but they're not. It seems to be the opposite. And I've been traveling a lot, and just the sense of entitlement, the selfishness that I see it coming from people, it really makes you want to slap a
Oh
person.
no, I couldn't agree more. And I so you think about the most tragic event before the pandemic would probably be 9/11. We're as US citizens, we're going to reflect back to 9/11 and the absolute devastation that that caused and the
Yeah,
impact that that made. And people came together. And it was this beautiful symmetry of this common like we are in this together. We are going to pull each other up. We are going to make sure that we reach
well,
backslide and well,
yes and
well,
no.
well, in my young 20-year-old mind, everybody was great.
I mean, I think then we had a common enemy, right?
Yes,
And what that did, though, is it was also the linchpin of, or another instance of jumping off point for more discrimination, right? Because we had
that is
people
true. That settled
being
in.
right? We had so many people from the Middle East, people who weren't even from the Middle East, but just happened to be wearing garb that ignorant
Yes.
people thought they were from the Middle East, and people were being targeted left and right,
Which is still happening
right?
today.
No, absolutely. But I'm just saying, like back then, it was
Yeah.
very prominent. So,
Yeah.
yes, there was this sense of we're pulling together, but it was we're pulling together against this common enemy, and this enemy doesn't look like us. And
Yeah.
so it really created more divisiveness, but it didn't feel like that because it was like, well, we're American, we're pulling together against them. Except
Yes.
when them were in our midst, it was like, oh, wait, no, right? So we were having a lot of that. And I think that is the challenge of being in this country, in the United States. I'm sure people are listening from other places as well, but specifically because when I travel outside of the United States, people always say, what is the deal with you guys and race? Like, I just don't get it. Like,
Like
what is
you are not the melting pot that you claim.
right? We absolutely are not. And it's pretty sad that we are, I think, ignorant to that and continue to like America is probably one of the most xenophobic countries,
Yes,
right?
agreed.
Because we have this sense of America is great, and I'm not saying it's not, but it's got its challenges. And I think that anyone who is willing to look at what we do, look at when I say we, America as a whole, through one lens and isn't willing to look at it through other lenses, we have a problem, right? And we saw that again the with when George Floyd was murdered, right? There was
Yes.
that opportunity for people to go, wait, what? I don't understand. This has been happening. And it's like, yeah, we've been telling you this for, I don't know, 50 years.
Yes.
Glad you're paying attention today. But it's been happening. So there's so many things I think that we are able to turn a blind eye to. And the goal really
Well,
is a lot of my goal is education. So as you educate and people learn, then I love that phrase. What is it? Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
it's true. It's
And
true.
that's really what I think I spend a lot of my time doing is helping people to see the things that we have been willfully blinded to for too long.
And it's one of those things to bring up another saying. It's like, while ignorance is bliss, ignorance is dangerous, very dangerous, and what it could cause by not opening your eyes and not seeing how things are and not understanding that no matter who you are, there are there is room for knowledge and there's room for improvement, and be grateful for that.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, a lot of what I do.
Yes.
And
So
it
how did you did you start working when a, a white woman tries to move your grandma out of the spot so she can sit and rest? You phenomenally defend your grandma, which is awesome. From there, did you then decide? I mean, I'm not saying like instantaneously in your mind, you're like, this is my career path. Did you, from there, did you find yourself like all throughout your life veering into the DEI world, or is it something that just gradually throughout all the experiences throughout time and what you see, what you've personally experienced, did you see the need and decide that you were going to be part of the growth and the movement to help repair the damages being done?
yeah, it was a slippery slope, right? I actually wanted to be a judge, but for the reason that I wanted to rectify a lot of the issues that we have in the our penal system, right?
Yep.
Our system, it sucks. It's terrible.
Yes.
And
You
I
want to talk
thought,
about the unconscious bias?
right, it's really bad. And one of the things I was actually really happy about, I had a class, I teach a class at a university, and one of the people in that class was actually a judge. Um, and it was just so great to have conversations with her and go over some of these things and help change some of her perspectives. And I was like,
Yes.
yes, this is what I
You're
need to be doing.
you're like,
But
I can have even more of an impact because it's not just me. I could impact all the judges,
Right. So
right?
the reason I did not, so I actually went to law school. I consider myself to be a proud law school dropout because I realized I was like, oh, this is not the way to do it. Because when I looked at how judges are constrained within many systems, some of these three strikes you're out rules and things like that, I was like, oh, there's no way in hell you could get me to do that. I can't. I know. Especially when you've got people, t three silly infractions and then all of a sudden they're in jail for 20 years, right?
Yes,
Like this is dumb AF, right?
yes,
And,
yes. Because
and
the
when you
system
think
is
about
broken.
so the system is absolutely broken and it's also very biased, right? So you have all of these people who are in jail, especially when you think about the fact of all the people who are in jail for cannabis use, right?
Oh,
And
no,
cannabis distribution. When they were doing it, it's a problem. Now all of a sudden,
it's okay.
capitalism has raised its head again, and there's money to be made. So now it's not a problem. But yet we still have all these brown and black people who are in jail for doing the very thing that we have now said is legal to do. But,
Yes.
again, I'm not going to go there. So,
That's a whole other podcast.
right.
That's actually a podcast series.
But so the reason I thought going to being in the court system, I would be able to make change. I realized by going to law school and starting to go through the process, I was like, oh, this is not going to happen. And so kind of floundered a little bit, actually ended up in financial services because I wanted to help then increase wealth. I thought, okay, well, I can teach people how to, be better with their money and
Yes,
let's create some generational wealth.
yes,
And then, of course, the financial crisis happened in like 2008.
yes,
So that was not a great time to be doing that. And so then I ended up just recruiting. I was like, in every job I've ever had, no matter what it was, I've always finagled my way into doing the recruitment for the
Oh,
company,
okay.
sort of unofficially, right? Because I really like it. I enjoy it. And so I ended up working as a third-party recruiter. And in working in that, I realized it's like, oh, wow, this is discriminatory. So every time I would try to get a woman hired, somebody with an accent, person of color, it would take me twice as long. It would be problematic. I was like, what's the deal? But we can get the white guys hired, no problem.
You
You're
know
not
what's
asking
sad?
questions.
You know what's sad is in eighth grade, because like young girls, I mean, we still like talk about like weddings and what are we going to name our children, all those things. Although I will say, I asked my sons the other day and they came up with some crazy names. But I, in eighth grade, said if I was going to have a little girl, I would name her Michael because if her name was Michael, she at least could get the interview.
Right.
And at eighth grade, like at 13, I saw what was happening and I knew what was happening when it came to corporate America and how difficult it was going to most likely be for myself,
Yeah.
but how difficult it would be for my kids.
And I think for me, I didn't figure that out till I was 30, but it's not to say that I hadn't experienced discrimination. I had.
Yeah.
I just really didn't realize how pervasive it was and just how ingrained it is into everything that we do. And so when I saw that firsthand, I was like, wow, this is bad.
It is bad.
This is really bad.
It,
So in trying to help people get hired, what I then found was I was putting people into jobs where they didn't stay because they weren't welcome. So the retention wasn't happening, right? So then I was like, well, we've got this turnover. I don't want to be putting people into jobs that suck for them. But that's just, at this point, a lot of the jobs for women and people of color, a lot of those
yeah.
jobs suck no matter what you do because they're just not treated right. And so I thought, well, dang, I don't want to do this. So how else can I help? So then I transitioned to, I was like, okay, I need to actually go into a company and look at what they're doing and try to do it from the inside. And I did that. And I was like, this is bad. This is so bad. I work for one of the largest banks in the world, and I looked at their hiring practices, and I was like, "Oh my God, my head's gonna explode."
Yes. And don't you ever ask yourself, some of these things that I'm saying to you should be obvious.
Oh, all the time. All the time. I'm like, you really pay me to come in here and tell you the most elementary of things that you should know. I don't understand why you don't know this. I feel like my fifth grader knows this. It's
Yes,
like it gets lost somewhere. Like we knew it, and then it gets beaten out of us throughout the school system and throughout, just understanding all the different things that we get taught, right? We get taught some really messed up things that go counter to us being decent, productive human beings.
I heard this one horror story from somebody in human resources that said that the CEO of the company, she would hand the stack of resumes over, and she noticed a pattern that he was removing women from the stack from the ages of 22 to 35. So she asked him, why are you removing these people? They're
Because they're going to get pregnant.
yes, but listen, but this was his response. I'm doing them a favor. I'm doing them a favor because I know that they're going to want kids and they're not going to be able to do this job and raise a family. So I'm eliminating them so they can do what they want to do. Like that was literally his mindset.
Kind of like, and I'm going to mess up his name because I don't pay attention to sports, but who's the guy that
Oh
just
my
did
God.
the
Yes, the
graduation
graduation
speech,
speech. I don't
right?
know athletes all that well, but I
I
do
forgot
know
his
that he
name.
stood up there and said
Was
something
it
about
Kansas
like,
City Chiefs, I
yeah,
think?
your greatest job is to be a wife and a mother.
Right.
Oh, sir.
I was, and this is another example of bias, right? So
Yes,
he gets to stand up there and say the most ignorant, sexist BS, and that's
yes,
okay. He gets to
and
make that speech. Yet
yes,
you have valedictorian of USC whose graduation got nixed, right? She's not allowed to get up and make her speech because of who she is. And
yes,
what she was going to say wasn't even anything, inflammatory.
yep.
Yet we allow, and this is what I'm talking about how society gets made, right? One
Mm-hmm.
speech is okay, the other is not. One worked really hard to actually be there and actually 4 years, right, to be able
Yes.
to get their degree and
Instead of,
should
I
be able
believe
to
he's a
stand
kicker or
up
something like
and be
that.
recognized. And that was stripped from her. But yet we allow this other type of speech.
Yes. Yes. And I was like, if he was going to say that, I hope he was going to foot the bill for all of their degrees that they were sitting there with.
Because clearly they're useless, right? Absolutely
Clearly,
useless.
clearly.
Butker, that was his last name, Butker. A very appropriate last name.
Is he the kicker? Was I right about that?
I think so. I think he was.
Okay.
I mean, yeah. That was it. Harrison Butker. It just came to
Maybe
me.
he just wanted to be known and he's like, you know what? I'm just going to cross the line so bad that finally somebody's going to know a kicker's name.
I, I'm just, yeah, very frustrated. So, I mean, you all are listening to me on a day when I'm a little bit jaded. Just know when
Yes.
normally I'm like, light of the world, I'll bring you all kinds of great information. But you're getting me on a day where I've had to deal with a lot. And, I'm like, I've had it up to
I
here
it
with
is
the ignorance.
well, I I hate to say this, but you definitely have job security.
I don't know that I have job security because again, we have people who, so we mentioned SHRM. I
Yes.
used to be proud to say, yes, I have my SHRM SCP, I have my SHRM what is it? Inclusive culture credential.
Yes.
I'm on the SHRM Speakers Bureau, but yet we have SHRM out here trying to align their organization with the BS that is coming out of the Trump administration. So, and policies, because now we're going from inclusion, equity, and
Yes.
diversity. We're taking the E out. Equity apparently isn't important.
Oh, equity is the most essential portion
I
of
know
that.
that. Most of us know this. But when you take an organization that has 500,000 plus members who are HR, and
Yes.
it's their job within organizations to actually implement policies, and that's the message that they're getting, that's not helpful
No, that's not helpful.
at
That's
all.
not,
It's actually harmful.
it is very harmful.
And if I were to talk to Johnny Taylor in person, I've talked to him a couple years ago about this, and I would talk to him again and say, Johnny Taylor, that is harmful.
It is very harmful. And with the diversity inclusion, that was always a thought on my mind of such the importance of every corporation. And I also think, and I said this out to the Dandelion members too, of you can even just be a sole proprietor. It's how you treat also your client base and who your customers are and how you're reaching out to people to make sure that there is that diversity inclusion that's in always the forefront of your mind because of the unconscious bias that we have. And but the equity portion didn't come to me as such a significant component of that until probably about 10 years ago. And where you're looking at it and you're not justifying, but you can understand why it is still very top heavy, white male dominant in most all industries. But you can see the good old boys club, the hiring those of likeness and image, right? Which is first always the visual versus the actual characteristics of the human being and their abilities. But that portion, not until the equity is stronger, is the rest of it going to change.
Well, and a lot of it isn't going to change because there really isn't an incentive. So it's like the incentive is there. However, like we see that if you have inclusive teams and teams with psychological safety, you're going to get, I think it's like 17% higher productivity. You get
Mm-hmm.
29% better team collaboration. You get like 20% better productivity. So any leader of an organization should look at those numbers and go, I want 20% better improved productivity, right? That's something I want. Yet, so on the one hand, they would say that, yes, I want that. On the other
Yes.
hand, they are fighting DEI tooth and nail.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. The two things don't go together.
It's because they're afraid.
You're saying one thing, but you're doing another. And I think that's the piece for me that frustrates me because most of my clients that I work with, people always say, well, look at what's happening. People are kind of shying away from DEI and it's a problem, is that a problem for you in your work? And up until very recently, maybe a couple of weeks ago, my answer was always no, because the KKK isn't calling me, right? I'm only getting contacted by clients who actually want to do the work, who
Yeah.
see the value in it and want to do it. It is not my job, and I never want it to be my job, to come into an organization and have to explain to you why I bring you value as a woman or as a Black person. I'm not going to justify myself and my existence to you. So
So
if you're coming to me, then you're ready to do the work.
yeah, so I'm coming to you right now. Let's say I have a team of 500 one day. Yet when this happens and I'm like, Stacey, help me get to that 20% increase. Help me, like look at what I got going on. Help me get there. What do you then do?
We start with data collection because I have
Okay.
no idea where to start without figuring out what's going on in the organization, right? So we do have to start with some data collection. I can look at employee surveys that have already been done. I can look at exit interviews. I can do, our own internal surveys. We like to do interviews one-on-one and really start to get that qualitative data that helps us to then figure out, well, what do you need to actually talk about? Because it's not our goal, to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
we need to really identify what are the potential issues. So, for example, one client that I was working with, they had come to me a couple of years ago, and then they realized they weren't ready because they were putting a plan in place to improve their hiring diversity, and they already kind of had that going. So they went off and did that. Then they came back a couple of years later and said, yes, so about that, what happened is we did that and it was great. We hired more women and more people of color, and they all left.
Okay.
So it was like, yeah, because you can't do one without the other. You have to
Yes.
recruit and retain.
Yes.
Both have to happen simultaneously. And you're going to retain if you have a, and that's why I focus in on inclusive workplace culture.
Yes.
Because if the workplace isn't inclusive, if the workplace isn't ready to receive people, then you can recruit all you want, but they're going to be there for a couple of months and go, ooh, this is not the place for me. And they're going to leave, which is actually worse than not recruiting in the first place, because now you
I,
spend all this time, effort, and
oh,
energy.
yeah, the time, effort, energy, in which we all know, and any business out there that's listening to this knows the significance of retention and how that is your goal, is to hold on to your employees and team members as long as possible, because the amount of money, the amount of time loss, everything when always constantly bringing somebody in new, like all that revenue that you're losing because you weren't capable of retaining. That's, to me, like, that's a no-brainer for people. But when they're doing the work and trying to bring that diversity and inclusion, what do you think is happening once they've onboarded everyone, and then they're like, holy cow, like, yeah, we did our 30-60 day assessment and we said that they were still great, and yet come day 90 we're receiving a letter of resignation or the email that I'm out, whatever it may be. What do you think is happening on the inside? Is it personalities and being received on that whole, like, who is it? The aircraft guy with the spaceship now. Um,
Oh,
people
you're talking about
reference people reference him all the time. Like, he
Elon
knows.
Musk?
Yeah, no, 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 no. The
Was it
other
great?
one, the British one.
Oh, wait. No, I was going to say Branson.
Yes. Like, people reference him, like, about his whole, like, the work environment and creating that great place that everybody wants to be there and
Yes.
everybody wants to work, and respecting who works for him and vice versa. So is it like you've created that? Is it that they're leaving because that's not actually really the case? And there's the comments that people will make, in which I have heard that people make in the workplace, which just again boggles my mind. It's not funny. It's not cute. You're like, don't ever assume that you're at a level with somebody to make the comments that I've heard being made. Or is it beyond that? And especially when you think about other cultural dynamics, that of how people, like, what they see, the prioritization of their lives, and having that diversity and that inclusion. And that could, like, as a woman versus a man, and what the needs are.
I mean, it's really putting your money where your mouth is, right?
Yeah.
So every organization is going to have a different culture. I have to say, I literally just got off of a Virgin Voyage cruise. They are my number one. I use them all the time as my example because they are absolutely a great place to work. Every time I get on the ship, I always ask the
Yeah.
different crew members, and I always go, look, no one's around. They can't hear you. Do you really like working here?
Give me the scoop.
Yeah,
Just
I ask them, I go, do you really like working here? You can tell me. And they will say, absolutely, love it. And I'll ask them, have you worked on other cruise ships? Have you worked for other, airlines or whatever? And they'll say, yeah. And this place wins hands down.
Yeah.
What is the difference? The difference is people are treated like people and they are left alone to do their jobs. So few companies know how to do this. Most leaders, and I feel like I'm shooting myself in my foot when I say this, but it's just, I'm going to say it. Most leaders do not know how to lead. They have absolutely no clue how to lead. And all they do is copy what has been done before by somebody else. They're like, oh, this person did this, and so I'll do this. But if you think about, if we use the example of the return to office
Oh, yeah.
that's been going on, right?
Yes.
So we have all of these leaders who say, I want you back in the office. Why do you want them back in the office, right? You want them back in the office because you don't know how to manage people remotely. That's not your employee's problem. That's your failure as a leader. You don't know how to do
True.
it.
True. I'm just
So
gonna let people
because you
know
don't
I
know
would
how to,
ask because I need the socialization.
that's a different conversation, right? I think when you can look at the fact that we were much more productive during the pandemic, people
Hmm.
were much happier, they had much more time to spend with their family. We spent less time on the road, less carbon emissions, less time in transit. I mean, less money on food at lunch and all of these different things. There's all of these benefits. And now, granted, there are some cons to it. I'm not
Yes.
saying people shouldn't come into the office,
Commercial real estate market would
right?
be hit tremendously.
I'm sure it would, but
Yes.
again, then figure it out, right?
Yes.
There are ways
Reinvent.
we evolve.
That's
And
what
but
we do.
again, we would say, well, the commercial real estate industry would be hard hit. So that means that everybody else has to suffer because this one industry doesn't know how to evolve. That's not my problem. Figure it out, right?
Oh, Stacey,
Blockbuster has it.
I already have it thought out. So you would create these various co-working spaces of where different industries that rely on one another can all cohabitate and like all take turns in that space.
Well, absolutely. There are a number of
There's so
solutions.
many different
My
ideas.
point is that nobody wants to come up with any because they're too lazy. They want to
Yes.
continue to do what they've always done because that's what they've always done. And doing anything else requires work, requires growth, requires education, and they don't want to do
Yes.
any of that.
No, no. They want to stay in the comfortable space that they have created versus venturing out into the uncomfortable.
Right. And, so that's where we are. And it's unfortunate. So when we look at what needs to be done, going back to your question about, well, what is it, right, that makes an inclusive workplace? It depends on the company. There's going to be different things. There's different things that I'm going to gravitate to. Like I might want to work for Virgin Voyage, or I might want to work for Marriott, or I might want to work for, a completely different industry. I might want to work in the construction industry, right? And how people work together is going to be different in each place. The job
Yes.
of the leadership in those companies is to figure that out. But instead, they're all sort of copying each other across industry and trying to use this blueprint that they think is going to just work across the board. And that's not the
There's
case.
no blueprint for this. There's no blueprint. The only thing that I would say that could be blanketed across the board is how you have to look at individual people as individuals and how you take that individuals to make the collective. Like I think like taking into account that one person and leadership style and what they need from you is going to be different than the person at the desk next to them.
Right. And so
So
that they have to be able to flex,
yeah,
right? Got to
yeah,
be able to be flexible. And I think that is what leaders actually need to be able to do now is they have to be able to flex and they also have to be able to learn. Prior, 20 years ago, leaders were expected to have the answer to everything.
yes,
We wanted them to be know-it-alls. Now
yes.
we actually need our leaders to be flexible and to be willing to learn. We don't need you
Exactly.
to know the answer. We need you to be
Which
willing to work with us.
you would think that they would sit back and be like, this is so much better. The pressure is off. I
Right.
can say, what ideas do you have? Like, how great is that?
Yeah.
I mean, I look at those as opportunities. I would, and every leader out there, and I also think that not every leader is a match for someone who needs to be led. And I think that those things need to be discovered at the beginning. My how I work might not necessarily work for somebody who wants to work with me. And that's okay. That's okay. That doesn't mean it's not going to work out forever. It's just at this moment in time, like it's just not the best fit. And understanding that, now to me, another great leader is then going to take that person and be like, however, I do know where you would like accelerate and where you would be great, but and let's push you on that way.
Well,
Now,
I
if the
think though a leader's job is because, like you said, you're going to have people who are going to be different. Yeah, as a
yeah,
leader, you can't say, well, I only lead this way, so I can only have people who respond to this type of leadership style,
no,
right?
I mean,
You
I
have to
hear
be able
you.
to.
I hear you. However, I know that I can be a very demanding person. While I will always allow people to do their thing, because I definitely do not micromanage at all. Um, and if I have to micromanage, then I then get stressed. Or like if I have to do what I'm asking you to do, then I'm
Right.
going to get stressed out, and then I am not in my best space. Um, but um, but I am very like trust and communication is like communication's very, very heavy with me. And if I have somebody who's not open to that communication, and where I currently am with a single show, now if I was larger, then that'd be a whole other different ball game. But right now, I know the capacity that I have, I would need to have more in order to be able to elevate that person right now
Yeah.
as a staff, as a staff.
Yeah. Well, and I think, being in this space that I think that DEI is not necessarily something that we have to be looking at a bit at being something additional and extra. I think no matter what your role is, no matter what you're doing, it should be embedded in. So we
Yes.
don't, again, we don't make respect and civility and all of these things separate. We just
Oh,
assume that
that's
they're going to happen.
yes.
So the same is true, I think, with, when it comes to being an empathetic leader, a leader with
Yes.
humility, a leader who's going to focus on, ensuring inclusion, making sure that my team belongs. Those are things that should just be happening innately, no matter what role you have. It shouldn't be on somebody external to come in and have to do those things for you.
I mean, decades and decades have gone and where leadership or those that were in leadership positions, but not necessarily leaders, have never had to think about that. They've
Right.
never had to do that. They could just sit at the helm and that's it. And now they're learning that people want much more. People expect much more. If they want to be still part of a company and that company want to still have them there, then there's that mutuality between the two.
Yeah,
I mean, what they
absolutely.
always say, respect is earned, not freely given, right?
Yeah.
So before we tell everybody how they can reach out to you so they can learn more, get your book, number one. Also how they can connect in case anybody needs you out there to help them with like streamlining and strategizing to their hiring process and then their internal retention process. I have to ask this one question. By any chance, do you have any like funny, maybe really bad story of an unnamed client of yours that you would love to share?
Um, I always use this one because it is, and in all transparency, it wasn't me specifically that did this. It was another consultant that I was working with, and we were trying to help a client to diversify, right? And they went to, so we sent them to HBCU,
Okay.
which is a historically Black college and university. And so the goal was to hire more Black people.
Okay.
And they went and they said, you know, we did a really good thing. I think we figured it out. We hired more diversity. And they also needed to do more with gender. But they came back and they hired 3 people. All 3 were white.
What?
2 women, 1 man.
Oh,
And I was
well,
just like,
so they hit up the gender thing.
but I was just like, but how do you go to a historically Black college or university with the intent to ensure that you reach out to more Black students and come back with not 1, not 2, but 3 white people?
Yeah. And then not only that, be like, it was successful. Not a holy crap, we went in there and we still ended up with white people. It wasn't that reaction. It was like, hey.
Like the statistical probability of them being able to do that.
And then they played the lotto.
So, these are the kinds of things. And then
Yeah.
when explained and said, now do you see the bias?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, all the time. Like I think about even networking events of people that I work with in varying industries, whether they are contracted to work with me for the survival of my company with insurance, accounting, all those things, or if I just know them out there in the community from other nonprofits that we might be involved in collectively, all these things. And it's always a man who will ask me about how my kids are. Always, well, that's their conversation starter. That's their not how's your business doing, not, and it's how how are the kids? What are they up to?
Yeah. Well, what I always loved was people would ask me, because I travel a lot, who watches your kids when you're traveling?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Their dad.
Yeah. Like, listen.
The other person who helped put them on this planet.
Yeah, exactly. Like I say this, I married a partner. Like we are friends. We are in love and he is my partner. And that is all the things. Not just one component, it's all the things. And I do think that there are a growing number of men that are willing, like recognizing that it they have to be involved in all aspects as well. That they can't just be like, oh, let me be gender biased and the females are the ones that are supposed to spearhead the families as well as bring in revenue, that we are all collectively doing this together. And that's really the attitude that needs to happen. But I've started turning around anytime a man has asked me that at an event, and I said, great, how are your kids?
Half the time they have no idea.
And they'll just talk about sports with their kids.
Oh my goodness.
Well, this has been amazing. So please tell all the listeners out there how they can find out more about you because they should.
Well, the easiest way is if you go to reworkwork.com and you click on contact us. We do actually check the contact us goes directly to my assistant's inbox, and we do see them and we do respond within 24 to 48 hours. It does not go into the ether. I know people think like you go to
Oh,
a
I
website,
know.
you put in a contact us, you'll never hear from them again. But that is actually the easiest and fastest way to get a hold of us. We try to just keep it really, really simple. But you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Stacey Gordon on LinkedIn. You can find our company page on LinkedIn as well, which is Rework Work. And I've been inviting everyone to participate in our 100K Conversations Challenge. If you go to 100kconversations.com, it will give you all kinds of resources for how you can talk to folks, because as I am approaching 100,000 connections on LinkedIn, I realized, I was like, what is the point of having all these connections if we're not talking to each other and we're not
It's true.
engaging? So this is my way of trying to get people to talk to folks who might be a little bit different than themselves, so that when we are referring, when we are networking, that we might be able to refer somebody who isn't a carbon copy of ourselves.
Wouldn't that be great? That would be great. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you, everyone, for listening in to The Seed. If you'd like to receive our weekly newsletter, go to Dandelion-Inc.com and click Let's Connect. And please be sure to subscribe to The Seeds podcast to hear more inspiring stories from other badass women that are all around us. Remember, behind every woman is a tribe of other successful women who have their back. To you all, thank you.